probably of primary importance in my research. And when I got invited, I was very happy and excited to come and hear other people, first of all, but also to contribute with the reflections that I have for my thesis, because I think a lot of the discussions, and I mentioned it yesterday during the dinner, when there are different disciplines, they're not as informed about the developments in other disciplines, and I think to keep each other synced on the same developments is great. And today I will talk about very shortly about the most important thing that I took away from my research, the current research. As Philip mentioned, I have been very busy because the developments were intense, and while finalizing my thesis, every day something new was coming out, and I had to wait for the certain judgments and certain decisions to come out and to write them down and then submitted. Last 3 weeks I was gone on the vacation enjoying, so this is like just a disclaimer, disclaimer that this is not updated to 3 weeks before, but the discussion, this is because it's important, because I know for sure that many things have happened in these 3 weeks. I also know what, but I cannot give you a full expertise on those things. But I will still, I think, the reflections that I'm going to share with you are valid. Well, online behavioral advertising, why did I focus on that? Because we talk about attention economy, we talk about surveillance capitalism, but in the end, like a very practice, like the itself, like what practice generates that wealth, and what practice causes a lot of the issues online in the digital services, I found to be online advertising, and a very particular form of online advertising that needs data. Yeah, and 50% of all the advertising, online behavioral advertising money goes to only 2 companies, Alphabet and Meta, and this is a significant share. So naturally, my thesis also kind of went to explore the advertising practices of those 2 companies. Not only that they earn most amount of money, but they're also the standard setters, right? So whatever they decide the rule in advertising is, that becomes the rule. So this is I think very important factor. So also during the dinner yesterday, I mentioned that we talked about liberating technologies yesterday, and some kind of hopes of like what it should be, like what kind of technology should be invented for them to create freedom and give autonomy. And I straight away thought of Google in 1998 or 1999. That's what exactly was a liberating technology, giving us search, all this amount of data and information available, and then translating that information into something that was digestible to a human being. And I thought it was great. But then Google at the time in 1998 came into the neoliberal world, where the only way you could earn profit was to use the data in the way that they used. So it kind of created the situation where we were at. The way I'm imagining online behavioral advertising, just to clarify, is 2 premises, right? So surveillance of human behavior is better. So there is an idea that the surveillance of human behavior is better to understand human preferences than disclosure of their preferences, right? So the paradigm that Google proposed in 2003 was that sending advertisers, if you come and see, I can give you the full observation of how humans behave. It's even better than what they disclose themselves. So if they say, I'm a surfer, I like this, I like that, that's actually not true. They don't behave that way, and I know how they behave. So that's what is being sold. But plus also that, if I sell the advertisement to the consumer, that also benefits the consumer. So these 2 very important logics that are being in the foundation of the online behavioral advertising, that surveillance is better than disclosure, and that the targeting based on surveillance is beneficial for the consumer. Well, now jumping in 2003, this has been, of course, debated for many years since the invention of the paradigm, but very first time in the court. So this is a bit later, but so the case of consent, right? It landed in the courts finally to discuss whether, to what extent to engage in such online advertising, you need to ask a permission to the consumers. And An argument from Meta was fascinating because they argued that you know consumers kind of don't know what is their preferences. We know that they prefer to be targeted this way, and this is good for them. We know this, so therefore we're going to target them without asking them if they want to be targeted. That was their main argument, and it's just this is Norwegian Data Protection Authority, and there you could see in the tone that they're very antagonistic to Meta, but they clearly make the point that it doesn't even follow it has a logical fallacy in it, the argument. But the case that preceded the Norwegian Data Protection Authority is from July 4th, 2023, and I think this is a landmark case, one of those major ones that after decades they go back to. This has happened, and then kind of it became quiet. Not many people talk about it, but I think throughout the year, people will realize more and more how important this case is and why. I'm going to give you a brief explanation of why I think this case is important. So just to explain, in some time 2019 or 18, a German competition authority started a case in checking online advertising issues with Meta. And because they observed that Meta has more than 2 billion users, so they want to understand how they the way they deal with the consumer, way they deal with the user. Does it give consumers the freedom of choice? Does it give consumers the ability to authentically decide on certain actions? And that's where actually the gatekeeping things that now we talk about in the DMA and the other documents come from. A competition authority in Germany first investigated, and they found basically, just to give a gist of it, their main conclusion was that Meta's behavioral advertising practice reflects that for Meta, for the advertising practice, it's much more important than the profit is maximized than what service is delivered to the consumer. And it's very simple. We kind of all know this, but legally this is important because it's like, what are the priorities of the company? Because companies sometimes argue that, we saw already that Meta in another case argued that it was for the consumer, it was for the benefit of the consumer that this was being done, it was for the benefit of the advertisers that it was done. But the clear conclusion that the court made was that the only who benefits from this practice is only Meta itself. So that was found out. And just before the case came out, many competition authorities from different regions, France, Spain, Germany itself, they published the market studies reflecting, okay, who benefits from this. And one particular just a number is the return on invested capital, and they found that fair estimation of Meta's revenues would be around 9% from the services that they deliver. But the actual the profit, the actual return is 50%. This is very, very top of what it is even possible to how much money can be extracted, how much profit can be extracted. So the court's decision was made that your main interest here for this practice is and sorry, one more disclaimer, that not only that it benefits Meta and so it maximizes the profit, but it also does not give benefit to advertisers and the publishers and the consumers. So I think this is important because as what is being sold is that this service is good for the advertiser because they want to match somebody with the precision. It's good for the consumer because they want to receive a relevant advertising. This is what is the paradigm of the practice. But the studies after study has shown that the only party that benefits from this is actually the gatekeeper. And we can go in depth in the discussion. Why is that so? It's basically related to the advertising paradigm and the fact that as an attention gatekeeper, they're the ones who have the data, and therefore to have the data-based advertising is beneficial for them because if you have something else, everybody else can engage in it. So it's holding people into this data-based advertising. So basically, that was kind of the finding of that. And what court also mentioned is that Meta does not analyze this profit, because profit maximization can be a legitimate aim. Nothing prohibits them to have that benefit. But What the problem the court presented was that Meta does not analyze, on the other hand, the legitimate, so the other interests involved, and in particular for the consumer. So what is being harmed? And it found there was no substantial evidence that the Meta did this investigation and therefore protected the interests of the consumers, and therefore made a decision that so basically the decision was that without consent, Meta could not engage in online behavioral advertising. That was 4th of July. Funny enough, Meta continued to engage in the behavioral advertising without asking consent for a couple of days. This, I think, has never happened, that the company actually dismissed the decision of the European Court of Justice. And then 14th of July, the Norwegian Data Protection Authority, angry at that, also started its own case and released a ban on online behavioral advertising that later became, 31st of October, became a ban in the entire European Union. And then as the kind of reaction to the ban, the prohibition to provide online behavioral advertising without consent, that was the prohibition. Meta introduced pay or consent model, which is also exploitative and which is now in question within the both European Commission and the European Data Protection Board. And this is not the only development in the field, but also the Google is being, there's an investigation ongoing about the Google's advertising practices, the Google Ad Tech case, and the Commission already has issued the preliminary decision saying that the only decision that the Commission sees that can make a valid change would be to divest Google. And they have not made such a decision for a very long time. This is the very, very, very the highest possible sanction that they can give to a private entity, and they're considering. And then they gave the documents to Google, and they now request them to, okay, prove us wrong. Basically, they said that we found you guilty. Now you try to change our minds. If you don't, we break you apart, and the advertising is done. And this week, I told you that I still saw on Twitter some updates. So in the United States, there's also a Google Ad Tech case, and 9th of September, the date was marked, the trials will start. So the same things are happening in both in the European Union and the US. The Google is being attacked for its advertising practices. And when we talk about Meta is like a small island into like the ocean of Google, right? They do earn a lot of money, but still the online advertising market is solely Google. And why do I talk about this? Because I think that the shift that people wanted, like since 2019, I think Zuboff's book was published about surveillance advertising, and the people wanted it. I believe personally that shift has already happened, and we're just in the aftermath of seeing that coming to be. And especially Digital Markets Act is a very strong tool to that. And linking back to the case of the Meta from 4th of July, which Digital Markets Act is basically a codifying version of what was found in the case in many aspects. Of course, it has much more nuance, and also it covers other topics as well. But in this particular case, it's just codified version of that. And there is this one idea that I mentioned earlier that, you know, for Meta, it was more like our profit maximization is over any other interest, and DMA and the case of 4th of July introduces this crazy paradigm which has never been in the private law, in the competition law before, saying that there is something more important. The human non-exploitation, consumer non-exploitation is more important than the shareholder value. And this is not explicitly stated, but that's what the decision means and suggests. And so my personal reflection on this is, and that's how I finish, I kind of name it as a consumer dignity, but it doesn't have to be, but it's the idea of that the consumer interest or the consumer autonomy or non-exploitation it takes higher priority in the new digital order after Digital Markets Act and after 4th of July judgment than any kind of welfare gains and any kind of shareholder value increase that you can have from a practice. And that is significant. We were talking about yesterday about the system, how, you know, if you embed a technology in a system that is neoliberal, it's if the exploitation is what gets you rewards, then the competition is who exploits better, and the winner is the most exploitative company and most. But if you change the system, if the incentive is that whoever serves the consumer non-exploitation interests more, so who gives more autonomy to the consumer in this case, or more the possibility of authentic choice, then the competition will be there. And this is more of like a reflection on the trend rather than a fact. So I see the consumer dignity emerging as a concept within the both adjudication and the laws of the European Union. And I think the couple of years to come, this is going to be much more solid, and we will see also Google Ad Tech case, and also the Meta's current case, which is in the EDPB about the pay your consent, that it will come out and it will be clear and explicit rulings of you cannot charge people for their autonomy. You cannot charge people to express. kind of where commission is getting. And if you have a service like that, if you're a gatekeeper, then you have to have a free service. And but I think suggestion is that what you can do is have only paid version, because it's not about, it's about this, all this trend is about saying that personal data processing is a human right. So you cannot, if you want to do that, then you need to have a free alternative. But if you don't want to do that, you just want to have it paid, then have it for €9 and that's it. And then it will just be like, probably a competition authority will calculate like, is this a good fee or not? And then we'll just find a balanced fee to €4 or something like that. But I think the more central of the discussion is, if you want to process personal data, then you have to have an alternative that does not process the personal data and gives exactly the same service. And that's where it's got the pushes.
We're out of time for the clarification questions. We need to go forward to the next speaker. So thank you very much.